Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. Tariffs are taking hold and budget crunch time is looming. There's lots to discuss on CloseUp, and we have Senator Maggie Hassan with us to answer questions. Senator, thanks for coming in this morning.
Thanks for having me.
I think it's fair to say over these last few months, sort of top priorities for the delegation have been highlighting potential cuts to Medicaid and also talking about the impact of higher taxes on trade through tariffs. Let's start on the budget side of things. You know, already it sounds like some of your colleagues on the Republican side in the Senate are saying, gosh, what the House is proposing on Medicaid goes too far. What are your thoughts?
Look, what the House is proposing, but what we've also frankly seen from some of our Senate colleagues, are really significant cuts by about a third to Medicaid. And remember, Medicaid is what covers seniors in nursing homes, covers about 180,000 people in New Hampshire, children with disabilities, some adults with disabilities, about 7,000 people in New Hampshire who are in recovery getting treatment for their addiction are covered through Medicaid expansion. About 1 million people nationwide get addiction treatment that way. And what we're seeing is the administration and Republicans proposing tax cuts for billionaires and corporate special interests, and they're proposing to pay for it with these drastic Medicaid cuts. So we're really speaking out against that. That would be incredibly harmful, not only to individuals, to our rural hospitals, and to our economy. We're also focusing on the harmful tariffs of a committee that I'm the top Democrat on, the Joint Economic Committee, just put out a report. We are seeing in businesses with 10 or fewer employees, a 3% reduction in employment already. That translates nationally to about 366,000 jobs. And the uncertainty is something I'm hearing about from businesses all across New Hampshire, large and small. So the president is not doing what he said he would do, which is to lower costs. He's in fact imposing tariffs that are raising them, creating chaos and uncertainty. He and Elon Musk are proposing really drastic cuts and have already engaged in kind of arbitrary and random and inefficient layoffs, because they're having to hire some people back because they're not analyzing before they're doing this. And he's also ignoring the rule of law and in some cases willfully disobeying it. That's undermining our system of government. It's undermining the services that our neighbors really rely on when they're having a hard time and need a little bit of extra help. It's also preventing us from coming together and addressing the challenges that the American people say they want us to address. Everything from lowering costs to increasing the supply of housing. So we will continue to push to make sure people understand the stakes, and we'll continue to push our Republican colleagues, because some of them should be joining us to come together and do the work that the American people want us to do.
As you noted, with those Medicaid dollars, New Hampshire is hugely reliant on those mental health,
right,
substance use disorder. But there is the bigger fiscal reality here facing the federal government. Doesn't spending have to be cut at some point in some place in order to deal with this massive debt problem?
Well, we do have a debt and deficit problem, and we should be addressing it. But that is why you hear Democrats saying, why are you giving more tax cuts to billionaires and corporate special interests? One of the proposals we're hearing from the Senate, if they change the way they account for their tax cuts, would drive the deficit up by $37 trillion over 30 years. That's unacceptable. There are a group of us, bipartisan group, that have long held that there are ways we can cut federal spending, streamline services. That is work that I've done in a bipartisan way. But this president, along with Elon Musk, fired a whole bunch of the people who do that work. So it's a really important time for Americans to come together, think about the challenges we need to address. Probably the one I hear the most about, affordability of the things that matter, right? Healthcare, education, housing, food, fuel, right? All of those things. We need to come together, and we need to do some things differently, including the way our government functions. But we can't do that if we have a president who is undermining our government, taking away critical services just at a time when people need them, and imposing tariffs that are driving people's costs up.
Yeah, the cost of living, obviously a huge issue for Americans right now, and the trade war with China the consequences of that potentially we're going to start to see in the coming weeks and months. Will we see supply chain disruptions on par or close to what we saw during COVID, or is that fear-mongering?
You know, what businesses are telling me is that they're really concerned about supply chain from China and elsewhere. Now, over the last 4 years, one of the things we did in a bipartisan way with the Chips and Science Act was actually bring critical manufacturing back to the United States. So I am hopeful that some of those supply chain disruptions won't be as significant because of the work we did in that Chips and Science Act around semiconductors and advanced manufacturing. But again, this administration is trying to unwind some of that work. And so that creates more chaos, more confusion, and along with, you know, the corruption we're seeing from this administration and the undermining of the rule of law, it is making a lot of businesses and a lot of Americans really uncertain about their future, just at a time when we need to be unified to really address the challenges that are there, but they are challenges that are surmountable if we are working together to address them.
Obviously, this won't be happening anytime soon, but should the Senate take action, would you support constraining the power of the executive when it comes to trade policy and tariffs?
Well, certainly we have had a couple of resolutions on the floor of the Senate to do just that. We actually had a couple of Republicans join us on that because we think the president has been taking tariff action that is harmful, and we think in some cases he is exceeding his authority and invoking authorities that weren't meant to be used in the way he's using them. But at the end of the day, this is again a broken promise from this president. He said he would lower costs on day one. He has not, and in fact these tariffs are driving costs up. And you know, when you talk to businesses, especially you know, building suppliers, for instance, they are talking about the fact that all of these building supplies, you know, windows, brackets, all kinds of supplies, the tariffs are driving these prices up. We have a housing crisis in New Hampshire and across the country. We need to be building more, not less, and the president's policies are making that more expensive.
You mentioned the rule of law. A big discussion right now is around due process and what sort of protection should be afforded to people who are undocumented or who are here in the country. Obviously, certain undocumented immigrants, when they're caught within a certain distance of the border or here within a certain amount of time, I think 2 years, they are subject to a more rapid form of deportation. But for those others, you know, there's been this big discussion of, you know, what due process do they deserve? And the administration is trying to move the line on that. If the Trump administration continues to sort of abrogate due process for that classification of immigrants, what's the Senate going to do about it?
Well, look, they're not just trying to move the line. They're saying due process shouldn't apply. The Constitution of the United States says if you're in the United States of America, you have the protections of due process. We have seen this administration deport someone by mistake and then refuse a court order to bring them back. We have seen a 2-year-old United States citizen deported while she is undergoing cancer treatment, which is unconscionable and wrong, all because this administration is ignoring due process. Now, one of the things that was part of that bipartisan immigration bill that we were considering about a year ago at this time, and that the Republicans rejected, one of the things that it did was say we should have a lot more staffing at the frontline immigration court level so that we can process these cases much more quickly. If somebody is here illegally, if they don't have a case for asylum, a quick due process hearing will determine that, and then we can deport them quickly, and we should. We need to keep our borders secure. We need to listen to our frontline personnel at the border, whether they're in the immigration judge position or they're a CB officer. We need to make our port of entries technologically modern and up to date, and we need to do more to fight fentanyl from coming across the border and the fentanyl precursors. But at the end of the day, that's about investing in the system. It doesn't mean taking away due process from people, which would prevent the kind of mistakes we are seeing this administration make.
The president is planning a military parade for next month. One, do you think this is a good idea? Two, will you attend?
Don't know whether I will attend or not. I doubt it, because look, this is about a huge expenditure of money. at a time when we really need to be addressing things like lowering costs, protecting people's health care, protecting people's addiction treatment, investing, for instance, in more immigration judges and more CBP officers and more technology at the border to keep our people safe. And instead, we have a president who is going to take a huge amount of money for a parade. I am all for celebrating America's history. We are coming up to our 250th, a whole slew of 250th celebrations. And the best way we can celebrate our country is recommitting ourselves to our founding principles: individual freedom, rule of law, and the power resting with the people, and not a president who says he wants to be king.
The Secretary of Defense has taken some heat for a series of missteps and mishaps there at the Pentagon, almost too long to list here in terms of the reports. What's your assessment of Secretary Hegseth at this point?
Look, Pete Hegseth is a foolish and reckless person using the Signal app, that commercial texting application, to provide and discuss sensitive information in real time with others in the national security community, but also with his wife and his personal lawyer, was reckless, it was stupid, and it put our service members in harm's way. Other countries are watching, right? We have China and Russia and North Korea, adversaries watching, and we have a foolish, reckless person running the Pentagon, one of the hardest jobs in the world. He should resign or be fired.
Okay, Senator Hassan, don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll talk about the Social Security office slated for closure in the North Country and what that will mean for seniors. Stay with us. Welcome back to Close Up, and we're getting right back into our extended conversation with Senator Maggie Hassan. Again, Senator, thanks for coming in on this Sunday morning.
Nice to be here.
Let's talk some politics at all. Do you think it's a problem for Democrats that you guys haven't found anyone of a high-profile nature to run for mayor of Manchester yet?
Look, Democrats need to be throughout the state, throughout the country, talking about the priorities that the people of New Hampshire have and working to address them. And I am sure we have a good bench in New Hampshire. We have a good bench in Manchester. We will make sure that we are drawing clear distinctions during all elections about the difference between Democrats who want to listen to constituents, address the challenges they face, work in a constructive way to move the country, the city, the state forward, and Republicans who are actively trying to take away critical services from our neighbors in need while giving tax breaks to the very wealthiest among us and to corporate special interests. And I think that, along with their failure to stand up to Donald Trump on things like tariffs and the rule of law, will be a very clear distinction for voters to consider.
You know, a lot of folks in your party feel like you guys have the momentum right now, but that's not materializing in this key early test kind of bellwether thing. There's that set of urban policies that have not done so well around the country that voters have soundly rejected. A pretty good chunk of the Democratic base still believes that's morally correct in terms of the homelessness and the criminal justice stuff. You can see how a moderate candidate could get caught in a bad spot here where maybe they don't line up with the way the Democratic base is right now. Is that what's going on?
What I know we need to do throughout this country on issues like homelessness is, among other things, build more housing. And that's one of the things that we really have an opportunity to look at the policies and procedures that we have in cities like Manchester, in cities and towns around the state and around the country to make sure that we are transparently and with local control investing in the kind of housing we see in parts of the country where there is more housing and lower cost housing, less homelessness. And that's one of the things we really have to focus on, along with mental health and addiction treatment, which again is at risk with this administration. What I hope Granite Staters know by now is that when we passed Medicaid expansion back in 2014, there was a provision that said if the federal government reimburses the state at less than the 90% that it did back then, and it has promised going forward, our Medicaid expansion program ends completely. That means that 7,000 people or so in New Hampshire who are getting their addiction treatment through Medicaid expansion suddenly are without care. That's the kind of policy that this administration is driving that will hurt Manchester, it will hurt New Hampshire, and it's something we have to stop.
Let's talk about that HHS clawback, the $80 million that was taken away out of the current budget in some cases. We've heard this has caused a lot of disruption. Some of the community health centers have already had to lay some people off. There's apparently a public safety component to this as well.
Some of that money is about training first responders. Some of it is about mental health treatment. But look, the federal government, this administration, decided to claw back $80 million from New Hampshire. That was money that was already promised, appropriated, committed to New Hampshire. A number of other states sued the Trump administration for that clawback, and because they filed the lawsuit, the court has given them relief, and they are getting the money back. New Hampshire didn't join the lawsuit, and as a result, right now, we still don't have that money back. It impacts public safety, it impacts public health, especially mental health and addiction services, and it's wrong. And it's the type of thing that we all need to stand up and push back against, including at the state level.
Yeah, do you think Governor Kelly Ayotte needs to be more aggressive here? Or having looked around the country at governors who try to stand up to the administration, they end up in perhaps a worse scenario sometimes with punitive measures coming in. So do you think the governor should be pushing harder?
Well, look, what I know is that in states where attorney generals have filed lawsuits, that money has come back. I know the importance for every governor to fight for her state, and I think we all have to stand up for New Hampshire.
The Trump administration, as you've noted, is cutting all kinds of staff across the board. Social Security office in Littleton is one that's slated for closure. There have also been some reports of issues with benefits for seniors and whatnot. Are they getting timely response and service from the Social Security Administration right now?
Let's just take a step back and think about what this administration has said and done about Social Security. Social Security is a program that has been in place for about 90 years, and over the course of those first 90 years, benefits have been delivered on time and, generally speaking, in the correct amount. Occasional mistakes, our office would hear about that occasionally, but for 9 years it's worked well. Elon Musk comes in and calls it, out of the blue, a Ponzi scheme, and says he wants to cut from, I think it's Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security about $700 billion. Then they list a whole bunch of offices for closure, Littleton being one of them, and they start laying off workers. And for a while, they refuse to allow people to verify their identity and their benefits over the phone, something that has been in place with security precautions for quite some time. What that has done is resulted in more delays. If you go to Social Security office in person, if you try to call them, it's taking longer to get your calls answered. My office has had repeated instances where people tell us they're either getting checks in the wrong amount, their checks are arriving late, or they're getting notices that their benefits have been suspended, and they're told that the reason is that the Social Security Administration suddenly needs more information. They're not necessarily told what information, and when they try to call and find out, they can't get anybody on the phone. This is a real problem, and the Littleton office is the northernmost office in New Hampshire. So if they do close that office, which they now are hemming and hawing about, but they still haven't promised us they won't, that means some North Country seniors would have to drive 100 miles to the nearest New Hampshire Social Security office. That, again, is untenable, and it's wrong. This is a lifeline for our seniors and for people with disabilities. These are benefits that people have paid into and earned. And so the administration needs to, full stop, stop targeting Social Security and start working on the problems that the American people want them to work on.
On the Homeland Security front, FEMA is also facing a little bit of a reset as well. We saw Arkansas not get a disaster declaration, even though the governor there is very close with the president. We hear the metric for disaster relief is changing potentially as well. How will that impact New Hampshire, where we've seen every summer for the last few years some, I think what people wouldn't say major disasters, but certainly ones that qualify currently?
Well, I am really concerned about this because obviously New Hampshire has 234 separate cities and towns. We are a small state, but even a disaster that by a big state standards wouldn't add up to a lot of money can devastate a town's budget. And we have always worked with the federal government to make sure that we are addressing the needs of local communities in the face of disaster. We don't always get the declarations we hope for. We don't always get quite as much money or help as we need. There are things we can do to improve FEMA, to be sure, and streamline the process. And I've got a bill in that would help lower administrative costs and spread them further for FEMA. But what we really need to do, again, is talk about the partnership that local, state, and federal government have had in responding to disasters. None of us want the kind of suffering and economic disaster that comes after a fire or a flood or a hurricane or these sudden rainstorms that have been washing out towns and structures in New Hampshire. None of us want that kind of human suffering to go unaddressed, and this is where coming together as a country has been one of our strengths to help each other out in these times of need. So I'm hoping again that the administration will learn more about what FEMA actually does and why it's so important to help communities get up and running as quickly as they can after a disaster. And I hope they'll reverse course, and I'll keep speaking out against it.
As we wrap up here, Senator, you know, sort of a legend in New Hampshire passed away this last week, Justice David Souter. You know, he was of a different generation, but you got to interact with him a little bit. What are your recollections of Justice Souter? So
first of all, what a kind and gentle man, and I say that he was always incredibly kind to me. I actually did the ceremonial swearing in for my first Senate term, which I was just really honored by. And he also, as a jurist, was unbelievably smart, you know, brilliant man, but also true to his Granite State values, open-minded, willing to listen to facts, which is, of course, what good judges do, really learn from the cases before them and apply the law with an open mind, without a predetermined result. And because of that, I think he was really a remarkable jurist who represented the New Hampshire ethos of being open-minded and being constructive, and really respecting our values and our laws. I think he'll go down as a really superb justice.
And a classic Granite Stater for sure. All right.
Sure.
Senator Hassan, thanks so much for spending time with us here. Happy Mother's Day, and to all the moms out there, thanks for being here.
And happy Mother's Day to everybody, too.